Chapter 18. We're nearly getting to the end of the story now, and this chapter is called See Him Off. Eric had no real plan in mind except to put himself between Emily and the Mastiff. It was the same one he'd had trouble with before from Stone Street. However, the moment he did this, events moved rapidly and carried him along. The Mastiff, though caught off guard, took a step forward and snarled. Eric stood his ground. Roy clutched his bag and looked for something to throw. Eric felt the fur rising along his back. For a second he thought he was changing again. A growl developed in his throat. Emily said, "2 dogs." Roy said, "See him off, Eric." Eric said, "Woof," whereupon, unbelievably, the Mastiff gave a sudden terror-stricken howl, turned tail, cleared the back fence with a tremendous jump, and disappeared. In the silence which followed, Eric could hear the distant clatter of teacups, the sharp bang of a starter's pistol, the crowd cheering. He felt greatly puzzled, but elated too. He had to check himself from advancing on the fence and barking through it. Roy's first thought was that Eric must have said something to the Mastiff. He still believed that Eric could communicate with other dogs. He was also, of course, bowled over with admiration. However, his final theory, developed later, was that the Mastiff may have sensed by smell, for instance, or a foreign accent in Eric's barking, that here was no ordinary dog. Here was a zombie dog, perhaps, or a vampire dog, a body snatcher dog. That'd be enough to scare a Doberman even. Emily, meanwhile, was unperturbed. Having seen one dog depart, she simply transferred her interest, not to say affection, to the next. This one was more her size, anyway. Roy said, "Did you see that bit of chain hanging from his collar? He's broken loose, I bet." "Woof," said Eric. Over her shoulder, and with all her attention fixed on Eric, Emily said, "Hello, Roy." She crouched and patted Eric on the head. He, for his part, felt a sudden urge to lick his little sister's face, and did so. She tasted of makeup, her bo-peep cheeks, and banana yogurt. Emily was charmed. She kissed him back on the nose and peered closely into his face. "Nice dog," she said, and then, "Eric?" "Eric's not here," said Roy, intervening sharply. He had the uncomfortable feeling that Emily was onto something. And there is Eric and Emily having a little kiss. "Come on, let's have an ice cream," said Roy. Roy certainly had a way with small children, and he understood them too. As the casual mention of ice cream, Emily was hooked. So Roy took Emily's hand and led her via the refreshment area, where lollies and ice cream were also sold, to the announcer's table. Eric followed at a distance. He wasn't keen to meet his mum. Emily, though, intent on her lolly, kept swivelling round to see if he was there. Then Mr. Hodge made an announcement saying Emily was safe. Shortly after, a hot and flustered Mrs. Banks came rushing up. She was out of breath and encumbered by a homemade shepherd's crook. "Oh, Emily, where have you been? Did you find her, Roy? You are good." "Where's Eric?" Mrs. Banks gave Emily a cuddle and a telling off. "He's we split up," said Roy. "I only left her for a minute," said Mrs. Banks, turning to Mr. Hodge. "2 dogs," said Emily. "A big dog and a little dog," Emily said. Even more hot and flustered, and encumbered by a homemade sheep on wheels, Emily's gran came rushing up. "Oh, Emily." Mr. Hodge offered his chair, and gratefully Emily's gran sat down. She fanned herself with a programme. "Look at her," she said, nodding at Emily. "She's not bothered." Emily remained engrossed in her lolly. "A big dog and a little dog," she said. "Yes, dear," said her gran, and Emily said, "I want one." Now Emily's gran spotted Roy. He was trying to sneak off. "Hello, Roy, where's Eric?" "I only left her for a minute," said Mrs. Banks. And then, "Yes, where is Eric? Can't face me, I'll bet." "I'll find him for you," said Roy, continuing to back away. "Tell him I'd like a word," said Mrs. Banks. "Right," said Roy. "And Roy?" "Yes, one more thing. What's Eric wearing?" Wearing? Yes, as far as I can tell, he's running around with nothing on." Then Roy experienced a guilty feeling he sometimes had with his own mum, made worse on this occasion by the fact that he himself was innocent. "Wearing? I can't remember," at which point, out of range of further questioning, he turned and fled. Let's stop there, shall we?